From the mists of antiquity, a story echoes. The journey of Odysseus, the wanderer, the survivor, has captivated humanity for millennia. But what happens when a visionary like Christopher Nolan, known for his labyrinthine narratives and grand scale, takes on such a foundational epic? The result, we posit, is not merely an adaptation, but a profound reimagining. A clash of titans, perhaps. Homer's versus millennia-old. Nolan's vision, decidedly modern. But how deep does this chasm run? How much of the original, raw essence endures, and what new forms emerge from the crucible of cinematic ambition? The Odyssey. A tale of homecoming, fraught with divine wrath, monstrous encounters, and the ultimate test of loyalty. Homer crafted a narrative tapestry so rich, it birthed a genre. Yet, every great story offers fertile ground for reinterpretation. Nolan, it appears, didn't just retell, he fundamentally re-engineered. 8 pivotal moments stand out. 8 seismic shifts that redefine not just the plot, but the very soul of the epic hero's journey. What drives these changes? Artistic license? Or a deeper commentary on the nature of heroism itself in our contemporary world? Our first monumental divergence, the Trojan War. Homer's Odyssey, famously, begins after the fall of Troy. The war, a decade-long saga, is recounted through flashbacks and distant memory, a shadow influencing Odysseus's journey home. It's the inciting incident, yes, but never directly shown. The reader is left to imagine its horror, its glory. Nolan, however, pulls back the curtain. He thrusts us directly into the maelstrom. Why this radical shift? What does it gain, and what, perhaps, is lost, when the imagined becomes the explicit? Is it about grounding the myth in visceral reality? Consider Homer's genius. The war's true cost is revealed not in its direct depiction, but in the psychological scars of its survivors. Odysseus's reluctance to speak of it, the lingering grief of other characters, the devastation left in its wake. It's a war seen through its consequences, its echoes. The tension, the dread, derived from what is not shown. This narrative choice forces the audience to engage their imagination, to fill in the brutal blanks. It imbues the hero's struggle for peace with a profound weight. A weight that, when made visible, might fundamentally alter its resonance. Nolan's approach is different. It's an immersion. An immediate plunge into the crucible that forged Odysseus. The film, we theorize, opens with the siege, the chaos, the desperate struggle within the Trojan walls. This provides an immediate, visceral understanding of Odysseus's warrior prowess, his strategic mind, his capacity for ruthlessness. But it also anchors his journey in a specific, tangible trauma. Does this direct exposure make his longing for peace more potent, or does it reduce the epic's reliance on the audience's internal landscape? A direct visual impact, undeniably. But at what narrative cost? Our second significant deviation centers on Telemachus, Odysseus's son. In Homer's telling, Telemachus's journey is a quest for knowledge, to find news of his long-lost father, to assert his manhood, and to rid his home of the parasitic suitors. His arc is largely one of maturation, guided by Athena. But Nolan reshapes this fundamentally. His Telemachus embarks on a journey not merely of discovery, but of active participation in the search for his father, perhaps even encountering some of the same perils. How does this alter the dynamic between father and son? And what does it say about generational burdens? Homer's Telemachus is often portrayed as initially weak, overwhelmed by the suitors, struggling to step into his father's immense shoes. His journey to Pylos and Sparta, guided by Athena, is a rite of passage, a slow awakening to his royal responsibilities. He gathers information, yes, but he doesn't actively pursue his father into the unknown. His triumph is in asserting authority in Ithaca, preparing for Odysseus's return. The focus remains on his internal transformation. A journey of growth, not necessarily direct physical pursuit. It builds anticipation for the eventual reunion, the convergence of two separate, yet parallel, arcs. Nolan's Telemachus, we speculate, becomes more of a parallel protagonist. His journey might mirror Odysseus's, a dangerous Odyssey in miniature, perhaps even leading to near misses or fleeting encounters with his father's trials. This makes him a more active participant in the epic's main narrative drive. Does this create a stronger emotional bond with the audience, seeing a son so desperately pursue his lost father? Or does it dilute Odysseus's singular struggle? It certainly injects a more immediate, perhaps desperate, energy into the quest for homecoming, turning a passive search into an active hunt. The women of the Odyssey, especially Helen and Clytemnestra, are figures of immense power and controversy. Homer presents Helen as a woman whose beauty sparked a war, later living with Menelaus, haunted by her past. Clytemnestra, Agamemnon's wife, is depicted as a vengeful murderer, a cautionary tale for Odysseus. Nolan, it seems, offers a more nuanced, perhaps even sympathetic, portrayal of these two figures. What hidden depths does this unlock? Does it challenge the ancient world's patriarchal judgment, or merely complicate our understanding of their motivations? In Homer, Helen is the face that launched 1,000 ships, her guilt a lingering shadow, yet she lives in relative peace. She offers comfort and wisdom, but her past deeds are always implicitly present. Clytemnestra, conversely, is the ultimate betrayer, her murder of Agamemnon a dark echo that warns Odysseus against trusting women. They serve as archetypal figures, illustrating the dangers and consequences inherent in the epic narrative. Their roles are clear, their lessons stark. A morality play, of sorts. But what if their stories, their agency, were more complex than simple archetypes allow? Nolan, it's suggested, delves deeper into the psyche of Helen and Clytemnestra. Perhaps Helen is portrayed as a victim of circumstance, her choices born of impossible pressures, her beauty a curse. Clytemnestra's vengeance might be contextualized with more sympathy, perhaps revealing Agamemnon's own transgressions or the patriarchal confines of her world. This humanizes them, transforming them from symbols into characters wrestling with profound moral dilemmas. Does this greater empathy serve the story better, or does it risk losing the powerful, clear moral warnings Homer intended? It asks us to question, to reconsider. The terrifying Laestrygonians, the man-eating giants who destroy all but one of Odysseus's ships, are one of the Odyssey's most horrific encounters. Homer describes them as monstrous, crude, and utterly alien. Nolan, however, reportedly transforms them into armored giants. This isn't just a visual tweak, it's a conceptual overhaul. From a force of nature, primal and unthinking, to something more organized, more human in its destructive capacity. What does this reinterpretation imply about the nature of the obstacles Odysseus faces? Is it about externalizing internal fears, or creating a more grounded threat? Homer's Laestrygonians embody raw, untamed savagery. They are a force of pure, indiscriminate destruction, tearing apart ships and men with terrifying ease. Their horror lies in their sheer overwhelming power and their lack of discernible motive beyond hunger. They represent the untamed wilderness, the primordial chaos that exists beyond the reach of civilization. Odysseus faces not a cunning foe, but an unstoppable natural disaster in humanoid form. The sheer randomness of their attack, the swiftness of the devastation, amplifies the fear. It's a testament to the unpredictable dangers of the unknown. Nolan's armored giants, on the other hand, suggest a more tactical, perhaps even organized, threat. Armor implies a culture, a purpose beyond pure instinct. Their presence might shift the encounter from mere survival against nature to a battle against a formidable, intelligent enemy. This could elevate the sequence, offering not just horror, but strategic combat, demanding more from Odysseus than just flight. Does this make them more terrifying, or less? A monster that thinks, perhaps. Or does it strip away some of the primal, irrational fear that Homer so masterfully conjured? A different kind of terror, certainly. One of the most charming and crucial episodes in Homer's Odyssey is Odysseus's arrival in Phaeacia. Shipwrecked and exhausted, he is discovered by Nausicaa, the princess, and welcomed by her parents, King Alcinous and Queen Arete. This segment provides a vital respite, a moment of civility and hospitality amidst relentless struggle. It's where Odysseus recounts his entire journey. Nolan, however, reportedly excises this entire segment. A bold move. What narrative purpose does this serve? Does it accelerate the pace, or does it sacrifice a crucial emotional beat, a moment of human connection and reflection? Phaeacia is more than just a stopping point. It's Odysseus's sole refuge, a place where he is treated with reverence, not suspicion. It's where he finds his voice again, sharing his incredible, harrowing tale with an appreciative audience. This storytelling within the story is fundamental to Homer's structure, allowing Odysseus to narrate his past adventures directly. It humanizes him, showcases his oratorical skill, and gives the reader a break from the constant tension. The Phaeacians even provide him with safe passage home. Without this, how is Odysseus's story presented? And what of the humanity it represents? Nolan's removal of Phaeacia suggests a desire for a more direct, perhaps darker, narrative. Without this moment of peace and reflection, Odysseus's journey might feel more relentlessly brutal, his suffering unmitigated. It implies a constant, unbroken descent into the challenges of his return. If the recounting of his adventures is gone, how does Nolan reveal Odysseus's past? Through fragmented flashbacks, perhaps? Or does he simply focus on the immediate present, the urgency of his homecoming? This choice heightens the tension, certainly, but it also risks losing some of the emotional texture, the brief glimmers of hope. The relationship between Telemachus and Penelope in Homer's Odyssey is complex, marked by Telemachus's growing frustration with his mother's indecision and her long-standing loyalty to Odysseus. He often speaks to her with a harshness that belies his youth, asserting his growing authority as man of the house. Nolan's adaptation, we understand, softens this dynamic significantly. What does this reveal about Nolan's take on family relationships, on gender roles, even on the very nature of adolescence? Is it an attempt to modernize, to humanize, or to simplify a psychologically intricate bond? Homer's depiction of Telemachus's interactions with Penelope reflects the patriarchal norms of the age. He openly dismisses her concerns, orders her back to her women's quarters, and effectively tells her to hold her tongue. This is not merely youthful insolence but a portrayal of a society where a son, coming of age, takes precedence over his mother, even a queen. It's a stark reminder of the social hierarchy. His impatience, his anger, is a direct result of his helplessness and the unbearable strain of the suitors. It's a brutal realism of ancient family power dynamics. Nolan's decision to soften Telemachus's treatment of Penelope suggests a more empathetic, perhaps even collaborative, relationship. He might be portrayed as a protective son, desperate to alleviate his mother's suffering and share her burden, rather than adding to it. This shift would align with modern sensibilities, fostering a more relatable family dynamic. Does this enhance the emotional core of their waiting, transforming a power struggle into a shared vigil? It removes a layer of internal conflict, certainly, but potentially adds a layer of mutual support, strengthening their bond against external threats. A different kind of strength emerges. The fateful scene where Odysseus's crew, driven by starvation and impiety, slaughters the sacred cattle of Helios, is a pivotal moment in the Odyssey. It seals their doom, leading to their deaths by Zeus's wrath. Homer depicts this as a direct transgression against the gods, a hubris met with swift, divine retribution. Nolan's adaptation, however, is said to tone down this cattle-killing scene. What does this mean? Less graphic? Less emphasis on divine punishment? Does this alter the thematic weight of human responsibility versus divine intervention, or merely make the story more palatable for a modern audience? In Homer's narrative, the slaughter of Helios's cattle is an unambiguous act of blasphemy. The sun god himself appeals to Zeus, demanding justice. The subsequent shipwreck and the drowning of the entire crew, save Odysseus, is a clear, unyielding demonstration of divine power and the consequences of impiety. It's a stark reminder that mortals defy the gods at their peril. This sequence reinforces the epic's theological framework, where the fates are governed by powerful, often capricious, deities. The lesson is explicit, the punishment absolute. But what if the consequences were less divinely ordained? Nolan's toning down of this scene could manifest in several ways. Perhaps the act of killing the cattle is less graphic, or the divine wrath is less overtly miraculous. The crew's demise might be presented as a more natural consequence of their desperation and poor judgment, rather than a direct thunderbolt from Zeus. This shift would emphasize human culpability and the ripple effects of rash decisions, rather than predestined divine judgment. Does it make the crew's fate more tragic, more a result of their own failing humanity? It foregrounds the human element, potentially at the expense of the mythic scope. A different kind of justice, or simply an adaptation for a secular age? Homer's Odyssey, famously, does not end with a neat, tidy bow. While Odysseus reclaims his home and family, the final books deal with the lingering political fallout, the need for reconciliation with the suitors' families, and an eventual, divinely sanctioned peace. There's a sense that the journey, while complete, has left lasting scars and new responsibilities. Nolan, we are told, provides the story with a more conclusive new ending. What does conclusive mean here? A definitive end to conflict? A clearer resolution of all narrative threads? And what impact does this have on the epic's enduring themes of cyclical struggle and the burden of heroism? The original Odyssey leaves several threads purposefully loose. The threat of civil war with the suitors' families is only averted by Athena's direct intervention and Zeus's thunderbolt, enforcing a peace that feels imposed rather than organically achieved. Odysseus himself is prophesied by Tiresias to embark on one final journey to appease Poseidon, dying a peaceful, seaborne death in old age. The ending acknowledges that true peace is hard-won and often fragile, with past actions continuing to ripple. It's a realism that underpins the myth, suggesting that happily ever after is rarely simple, even for a hero. Nolan's desire for a conclusive new ending suggests a tighter, more self-contained narrative. This might mean all conflicts are resolved definitively, all antagonists vanquished, and Odysseus's future settled beyond doubt. It could imply a more traditional heroic arc, where the hero's trials culminate in a true, lasting peace. This provides emotional satisfaction, a sense of closure that Homer intentionally deferred. But does it sacrifice the deeper resonance of the original, the understanding that peace is a constant effort, that the past always demands reckoning? A clean slate, or a missed opportunity for continued depth? Returning to our initial divergence, the Trojan War. By showing it directly, Nolan grounds Odysseus's journey in immediate, visible trauma. This isn't just a distant memory, it's the genesis of his suffering, vividly etched onto the screen. It changes how we perceive his every challenge, his every yearning for peace. The abstract becomes concrete. Is this a necessary update for a visually driven medium, or does it diminish the poetic power of illusion? A question of spectacle versus subtlety. The impact on character motivation, however, is undeniable, a warrior defined by the war, not merely affected by its aftermath. The transformed Telemachus. His proactive quest makes him an active participant in the wider epic, rather than a narrative subplot. This intertwining of father and son's journeys creates a different kind of suspense, a race against time perhaps, or a foreshadowing of shared destiny. It's a shift from internal growth to external action. Does this elevate Telemachus to true co-protagonist status, or does it detract from Odysseus's singular burden? The implications for thematic explorations of legacy and generational impact are profound, weaving a tighter familial web through the narrative fabric. By softening Helen and Clytemnestra, Nolan injects a greater degree of moral ambiguity into the narrative. They become less symbols of transgression or vengeance, and more complex individuals shaped by impossible circumstances. This invites a deeper contemplation of justice, choice, and patriarchal power structures. It asks us to look beyond easy villainization. Does this modern lens enrich our understanding of the ancient world's women, or does it impose contemporary values onto stories that held different meanings? The re-evaluation of these female figures speaks volumes about evolving societal perspectives. The armored Lestrygonians transform the encounter from a brush with primal, chaotic nature to a confrontation with a formidable, perhaps even organized, foe. This shift grounds the mythic menace in a more tangible reality. It makes Odysseus's survival less about luck against an incomprehensible force, and more about strategic cunning against a powerful, albeit monstrous, enemy. Does this make the threat more psychologically resonant, or does it diminish the awe and terror of the purely supernatural? A different kind of horror, one perhaps more aligned with modern genre expectations, emerges. The omission of Phaeacia profoundly alters the narrative's rhythm. Gone is the emotional respite, the moment of reflection and storytelling. This accelerates the pace, creating a more relentless, unbroken thrust towards home. Odysseus's suffering becomes unmitigated, his journey a ceaseless ordeal. But does this relentless pace enhance the urgency, or does it sacrifice the nuanced character development that Homer achieves through the Phaeacian interlude? A gain in tension, perhaps, but at the cost of quieter, more reflective moments that define character beyond action. The hero's internal world, compressed, perhaps. The softened dynamic between Telemachus and Penelope underscores a move towards shared humanity and mutual support within the family unit. This redefines their waiting, transforming it from a mother's passive vigil and a son's frustrated attempts at control into a shared burden. It emphasizes resilience and familial bonds against overwhelming odds. Does this resonate more powerfully with a modern audience, or does it smooth over the sharp edges of ancient realism and the tough choices necessitated by patriarchal structures? A more harmonious, if less historically faithful, depiction of love and loyalty. By toning down the cattle-killing scene, Nolan shifts the emphasis from explicit divine wrath to the more human consequences of desperation and poor judgment. This reframes the crew's demise as a tragic outcome of their own failings, rather than an arbitrary celestial decree. It emphasizes human responsibility and the natural order of cause and effect. Does this ground the tragedy in a more secular, relatable framework, or does it diminish the awe-inspiring power of the gods that permeate Homer's world? The narrative focuses less on divine intervention, more on fatal human decisions. The world feels smaller, perhaps. Finally, the conclusive ending. Nolan's choice to provide definitive closure offers a sense of emotional catharsis, a clear endpoint to Odysseus's epic struggles. It satisfies a modern audience's desire for resolution. Yet, Homer's open-endedness, the lingering threads of conflict and the prophecy of further journeys, speaks to the cyclical nature of life and heroism. It suggests that even after the grandest Odyssey, new challenges always await. Does Nolan's conclusive ending offer a more satisfying experience, or does it sacrifice the deeper philosophical truth of an unending journey, an eternal struggle for peace? A potent question of narrative philosophy. Why these profound changes? A director like Nolan isn't merely retelling, he's interpreting. He's speaking to contemporary audiences, using an ancient canvas to explore modern sensibilities. Perhaps he seeks to emphasize realism over myth, human agency over divine intervention, and familial bonds over societal hierarchy. These aren't arbitrary choices, they are calculated narrative decisions, each one a subtle or seismic shift in the story's underlying philosophy. What does this tell us about the enduring malleability of myth, its capacity to adapt and reflect the values of each new generation? The Odyssey, re-examined. Let's quantify the shift. In Homer's Odyssey, direct war depiction, 0%. Trojan War's impact is almost entirely psychological or recounted. Nolan, by contrast, could devote an estimated 10 to 15% of initial runtime to the war, making it a visceral foundation. Telemachus's active journey in Homer, perhaps 15% focused on his internal growth. Nolan? Possibly 30 to 40% of his arc as an external, parallel quest. The differences aren't just qualitative, they're structural, affecting the very distribution of narrative weight. These numerical shifts reveal a deliberate recalibration of focus, reshaping the epic's core. What story does the runtime itself reveal? Each change Nolan makes carries with it significant stakes. The Trojan War, Telemachus's journey, the portrayal of Helen and Clytemnestra, the Laestrygonians, the absence of Phaeacia, the softened family dynamics, the toned-down divine wrath, and the conclusive ending. Each decision is a narrative gamble. It's an attempt to make an ancient story resonate anew, to find its beating heart for a generation accustomed to different rhythms. Does this approach elevate the classic, or does it fundamentally alter its essence, severing it from its original cultural bedrock? The very definition of adaptation is challenged. Homer's Odyssey, in its original form, is a testament to the enduring power of myth, the complexities of human nature, and the often capricious will of the gods. It is a story of long suffering, cunning, and the arduous journey home. Nolan's take, however, transforms this landscape. It strips away certain mythological elements, grounds others in a more tangible reality, and reshapes the emotional core to fit a contemporary narrative sensibility. But does this modernization reveal new truths, or simply reflect current cinematic trends? The canvas is the same, but the brushstrokes are undeniably new. And the message? That's for us to decipher. So, how different is Nolan's Odyssey from Homer's original? Profoundly. These 8 major changes don't just tweak the story, they redefine its very architecture, its thematic weight, and its philosophical outlook. It's a reimagining that prioritizes a contemporary audience's expectations for visual spectacle, character agency, and narrative closure. While Homer left us with a journey that, in many ways, never truly ended, Nolan offers a definitive statement. A bold vision that challenges the very notion of faithfulness to a source, forcing us to ask, what, truly, defines an epic for the modern age? The answer, perhaps, is in the questions it leaves us with.